Page 135, it's one of those Talmudic pages that have a lot of application in a sense of practical halacha. Here are several examples. A convert, someone, a male convert that decided to partake of future of Jewish destiny. Part of the procedure, side of learning, appearing before the Bet Din, is the procedure of partake of the covenant, which is the Brit Milah. But what do we do with the situation that someone already born or circumcised as a child? Another example, what happened to a baby that born circumcised? All of those questions connected to our subject of Shabbat, since part of the obligation we mentioned yesterday and day before yesterday is the obligation of having the Brit Milah, the circumcision, on time, which is when it's occurred on the circumstance that the 8th day is Shabbat, the Shabbat override the Brit Milah. So the question is, what do we do with a situation like that? And I mentioned just some of many other situations. So that's part of the subject of our discussion today for sure. We go with much more details with many different variations of Shabbat and Brit Milah and Hatafat Brit, which soon we're going to learn that definition. Our subject begins with the very bottom, the last line of 134b. We learn in the Mishnah, ספק ואנדרוגינוס, אין מחללים את השבת, ורבי יהודה מתיר באנדרוגינוס. We said when we have a doubt, such as a baby born and is a combination of male and female, or many other circumstances that we're not sure, we, according to Tanakama, do not violate Shabbat if it's not 100% clear that this is a baby boy and this is a baby boy that born in certain time, etc. Rabbi Yehuda allow in androgynous, which we explained it's a combination of two different entities, the male and the female, to go ahead and override Shabbat. Now we zoom in. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages teach us. Orlato, we learn in the book of Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 12, Ubayom Hashmini, the Torah commanded us, at the 8th day, Yimol Besar Orlato, we should take off the foreskin. So we learned earlier in page 132a that if we have to do the Brit Milah on time, that override Shabbat. So now we ask question from the word orlato, which means his foreskin, meaning specifically his foreskin, that really apply that that the circumstance of his orlato vadai, which means someone who's absolutely by Jewish law certain foreskin, docha et Shabbat, override the Shabbat. We just turned the page 135a. Velo safek docha et Shabbat. But if we are not definite that it's really a proper time, a proper entity, in something that it's a doubt, we don't override Shabbat. So now we go deeper and we said, Orlato vadai docha et Shabbat, velo androgynous docha et Shabbat. If you know that it's for sure a foreskin, so that's different story. So then you have to do the Brit Milah on time. But if it's an uncertain foreskin, that's not override Shabbat, which means that you learn that the definition of the foreskin. What does that mean? So the Ritva tells us, and also you see here the Tosfot, that many variety of option when it's come to foreskin. I just give you several examples. Soon you see the specifics. Imagine if a baby boy was born and you're not sure if he has a foreskin or not. He's not sure if he's born circumcised or not. Or if he was born with all kind of defects. So now we have the issue, number one, if he needs a circumcision. And if he needs a circumcision, the question is that under the category of regular circumcision, that you have to do it on 8 days specifically, which is Shabbat. I'll go even deeper, mention something that Rabbi Akiva Eiger mentioned. If it's a twilight time, as you know, we count the day by the twilight. So if it's not clear 3 stars, as the Taz tells us, and the baby was born and time in between, which is, let's say it's a Thursday evening, the eve of Friday, at the twilight time. So if it's Friday, then we count 8 days, and the following Saturday is the 8th day. But if it's Thursday, then the following 8th day is going to be Friday. So now Rabbi Akiva Eiger tells us that it's called Sfek Sfeika. You have one doubt when exactly he was born, and then with that you have a doubt if he was born with the foreskin or without the foreskin. So with that in mind, you see how deep it's and how serious. Why? Because we take the Shabbat, mitzvah of Shabbat, very seriously, and we want to do our very best to avoid violation of Shabbat. So in one hand, the Torah tells us that Brit Milah overrides Shabbat. On the other hand, when you enter the domain of Sfekot, if you have all kind of quandaries, if you have a dilemma, you're not sure how. So now we ask those questions. Here is an example. Androgynous. Androgynous is someone who's not clear if it's a boy or girl, if it's a male or female. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, androgynous dochet HaShabbat ve'anush karet. Rabbi Yehuda hold that if the father of the child who's responsible and he has to go ahead and circumcise the baby or take a shaliach, a moel, to do it for him. So if he did not circumcise an androgynous on time, he violated a biblical precept. Why? Because they have the same halacha as someone who's born in a regular manner. Further on, Orlato vadai docha et HaShabbat, velo nolad ben hashmasho docha et HaShabbat. If you know for sure that he has a foreskin, that's clearly override Shabbat. However, if he was born in the twilight of the eve of Friday, now it's a question if it's a day, if it's a night. So you cannot go ahead and circumcise the baby next Shabbat, because it may turn that it's maybe the 9th day. You see here that the debate here, it's not so clear, not so simple. We go another phase. Orlato vadai docha et HaShabbat, velo nolad kshu maul docha et HaShabbat. Only if you know for sure that he is a foreskin, then you know that it's override Shabbat. But if he was born circumcised, that's a question. How you tell me that that's override Shabbat? Shebet Shammai omrim. Now listen carefully. Now we're going to the next stage. Here is the machloket, a disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai omrim tzarich latif meno dam brit. Usually, as you know, Beit Shammai are much stringent. So they said there is a concept called hatafat dam brit, which means you need to put, in our language, in our time, you take a small needle and you basically pull a tiny minute, like infinitesimal, very small, tiny piece of blood out of the baby boy, and in that sense, he is now circumcised. ובית הלל אומרים אין צריך. בית הלל said no, is no needs. If he was born circumcised, that's it. So therefore, if it turns that he was born on the eve of Friday, and now you're counting the days, which is, let's count together, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So now we have Friday, the 8th day. Okay? Simple. But if it's in the question of Friday, in its twilight, so if it's Friday, then you count now the next Friday.
Right.
But if it's in a twilight, so you're not sure if the 8 days is Friday or Saturday of Shabbat. So now, how you handle that? So they said, the big question Rashi said here, the issue here, it's called, soon you see it, it's called Orla Kvusha. What does that mean? That it's not true to say that he's born fully circumcised without the foreskin. The only thing is, you do not see the foreskin, which means it turns that the way that the skin presented to us is in a way that we don't recognize it. But it's possible. So you have to take a small tiny of the skin from the top of the Rosh HaGviyah, top of the that part, and in that sense you take it. That's one school of thought. The Meiri hold that way. That's one way. Is another way that most of the Rishonim hold, that you take a little nail and you make a little scratch and then come out some blood. The Chazon Ish hold that in Orach Chaim Samech Bet 62, and Or Zarua hold that way, etc. So someone who's not Jewish, let's say adopted baby, etc., and the baby is without the foreskin,
it's already circumcised.
yes, but the question is that sufficient?
Well, you need to draw the blood.
To draw the blood, okay? So there is a famous Reb Chaim, which it's beyond the scope of this shiur, that dealing with if that sense, if that drawing a small tiny blood is enough, if there is a hidden small part of the foreskin we didn't cut. But anyway, אמר רבי שמעון בן אלעזר, לא נחלקו בית שמאי ובית הלל על נולד כשהוא מהול, שצריך להלטיף בן אדם ברית מפני שעורלה כבושה היא. He said, it's not even a machloket, it's not even a disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, that one who is born circumcised, it is necessary to drip the covenant blood, because they agree that it is a case of concealed foreskin. Manechleku, what exactly the difference between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel? על גר שנתגייר כשהוא מהול. If it's a convert, but while he is about to complete the process of conversion, he is already circumcised. Now, the idea of drawing a small blood is a sentence in the book of Zechariah, chapter 9, that said that we have to draw a small blood. That's part of the notion of that covenant. Now, Rashi tells us, take for example a Muslim, an Arab, that they are doing Brit Milah. So, if they're doing Brit Milah, Rashi said here if the baby was born or it's someone it's already a convert, so he said, what do you do? Or Geritva said, Givoni Maul, someone who's Gibonite. So שבית שמאי אומרים, צריך להטיף ממנו דם ברית. בית שמאי required to pull a small minute blood. ובית הלל אומרים, אין צריך להטיף ממנו דם ברית. Because according to בית הלל, drawing a small blood apply only to a baby that was born circumcised. Why? Because it may be concealed foreskin. However, a regular convert that is converted while he is already circumcised, so is no issue of concealed foreskin, so is no need to pull out blood. That's what they hold. Beit Shammai said yes, you need to do it, because it's a separate mitzvah to be part of the covenant. Just to refresh our memory what the Rambam said, the Rambam said in Hilchot Shabbat chapter 13, he said that someone who come to convert to Judaism, there are three important components that he needs to go through. Number one, we all know it's a process of make sure that he is sincere and a process of learning. Then he needs to take the covenant, which is the Brit Milah. And then upon completion that part, then he can duck himself in the mikveh, and that make him part of the Jewish destiny, Jewish faith. So here's the thing is, each component on that process taken a separate time, separate entity in that sense. So here they said here, since it's a separate mitzvah, so Beit Shammai said you don't need to go ahead and drop, if let's say if it's an Arab that already have a Brit Milah and he complete the process of learning, etc., he just need to duck himself in a mikveh. Amar, when we said at the first part of the Braita that his foreskin override Shabbat, velo safek doche et Shabbat. Whenever you are in a doubt, that's not override Shabbat. So now what happened here? You have several sfeikot, you have several questions. You remember them? We discussed androgynous. We discussed someone who's born bein hashmashot at the twilight time, Friday. And we discussed someone who's born circumcised. So what do you mean by saying that is not override Shabbat? La tuye hadetanu Rabbanan. That's derived from what the rabbi tells us. Ben Shiv'ah, if someone was born while the mother was pregnant and she delivered the baby at the 7-month-old, mechalelin alav et Shabbat, we desecrate the Shabbat in order to do Brit Milah. So the discussion here is what? The big discussion is to do Brit Milah on Shabbat. The Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim Shin Lamed and the Tur as well. So they said that now we need to differentiate between a saving life, because the 7 month we can desecrate the Shabbat in order to heal him, in order to revivify him, but the 8 you don't do that, and therefore if you have a doubt you don't desecrate Shabbat, only if it's clear. So if it's a safek pekuach nefesh, even it's a question getting close to a life-threatening situation, that's different. Other than that, we don't violate Shabbat. He said safek ben shiva leshmona. If it's a not clear situation, so it's a question if it's a 8 or 9. So he said en mechallim alav et Shabbat. So Rashi here tells us it's a big question if he survived. So here our discussion is machshirei mila, to do all the preparation for the brit in a question that it's not clear. What is it? It is 8 or 7. So they said, if you're not sure, you don't violate Shabbat. But during the week you should do it. Ben שמונה הרי הוא כאבן ואסור לטלטלו. 8 days considering as like a stone, which means that the halacha of muktzeh, which means if it's a 7, if it's a question, if it's a 7 or 8, you can carry it. So Tosfot said that in our time you can carry any baby, because we are not 100% sure the proper time of the inceptions and the proper time of the development of the child. It may be 8, it may be 9, it may be 7. So therefore you can carry him on Shabbat. אבל אמו שוחה ומניקתו מפני הסכנה. But his mother can go bend and nurse him. And Tosfot said they do not worry that she may be carrying him. Why? Because they said that the big question is this: it's a sakana, it's dangerous. She have in her breast the milk, and it's dangerous for her if she's not feeding him. So it means either because that the Khatam Sofer said that it's because of the mother, or because both the mother and the baby. So therefore you can go ahead and allow the mother to bend herself and nursing without carrying him because of the dangers. Itmar, Rav אמר הלכה כתנא קמא, ושמואל אמר הלכה כרבי שמעון בן אלעזר. So now we go back to our original question, which is, if a baby was born circumcised, do we need to do a hatafat dam brit, which is again small minute blood coming out, or not? So Rav hold halacha according to the Tana Kama, the first Tana, which is that the disputation between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel is in regard if the baby was born circumcised. That Beit Hillel, that we go by halacha according to Beit Hillel, most of the time hold that he doesn't need to. And Shmuel said halacha is according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that he hold that even someone who was born circumcised, he still needs to have this little blood. Why? Because he said that this is a concealed foreskin. It's called in Ivrit or lakvusha. And he holds that the machloke, the disputation, is only in regard to a convert that was already circumcised, such as an Arab or a Givonite by the Ritva. Story. Rav Ada bar Ava itlid lehanui nuka kshu maul. Now the GEMARA going to share with us a terrifying story, very unpleasant to say the least, but how do you say it? In life you learn many lessons, sometimes in the hard way. So here is an example for that. Rav Ada bar Ava, he has a baby boy that was born circumcised. Ahadle atleisar mohale. So the baby was born apparently on Friday in the twilight time. And you're counting 8 days. Remember how it works? The first day is Shabbat, if it's a twilight, and then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the following Shabbat is the time of the Brit. Now, the baby born circumcised. So Rav Ada bar Ava went ahead and he tried to find a mohel to do the Brit on Shabbat. What exactly he wants them to do, since there's no foreskin, you may ask? The answer is he wants them to do, quote unquote, professionally pulling out the blood of the covenant, the dam brit. These 13 mohalim that he approached, none of them are willing and ready to do that, because they said that is safek orla kvusha. This is a doubt if it's basically concealed foreskin, maybe yes, maybe not. And because in a situation like that, even Beit Shammai said you shall not violate Shabbat for that situation. You're doing the brit override Shabbat only if it's a case of clear, very clear foreskin. So what happened? Ad shavye krut shofcha. So Rav Ada bar Rava saw that the 13 mohalim refused to do it. So what did he do?
Did himself. But in a way, apparently, who am I to comment? But apparently, Rav Ada bar Rava wasn't a professional mohel. So it turns that he created for that poor little baby that he will not be able to have children anymore in the way that he did it. In other words, it was unintentionally, he cut a little part of the gid of that limb that is no longer be able to have babies, to have children. Amar, so apparently Rav Ada was broken-hearted over that. He said, Teitili de Avre de Rav. I deserve this punishment, which is, it's not just he damaged the baby, he felt horrible over that. You know, it's like, I don't know if you remember, but several years ago we have a fellow that a child jumped between two cars, and he was driving in that small street, and he hits the child, and the child became disabled. Went to the whole motion of the court and the law, and he was 100% free of guilt. He drove below than 25 miles an hour. He drove slowly, drove carefully. He was buckled up. The child ran after a ball and ran between two cars and jumped into the. Yet the guy never let go. He is broken-hearted since that incident. No names. So with that in mind, Rav Ada bar Rava realized it was a mistake, and he said, I deserve this punishment, which is to be broken-hearted in a sense, because I violated what Rav said, that he holds the same as Tana Kama, that someone who's born circumcised, you do not need to have atafat dam brit, you don't need to pull out the blood. Amar le Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman said to Rav Ada, ve'adi Shmuel lo avar, he didn't violate what Shmuel said. Eimar de amar Shmuel bechol, which means when Shmuel said that if it's a concealed foreskin, you need to do some type of drawing blood, that apply only during the week. Beshabbat bi'amar, did he say to do that on Shabbat? Because again, if it's in a state of safek, if it's a quandary, if it's not clear, you don't do it. So why you draw blood on Shabbat? Vehu, meaning Rav Ada bar Rava hold, savar vadai orla kvushahu. He hold that it's for sure concealed foreskin, and he hold that it's not a doubt, and therefore he said that you can go ahead and violate Shabbat in order to do what? To pull some blood out. They said the itmar that we learn. Rabba amar chayshinan shema ola kvushai. Rav Yosef amar vaday ola kvushai. Here you see a machloket that between a Rabbi and Rav Yosef. One said that it's for sure concealed foreskin, and the other one said no. So if you say that if it's a safek, if it's a doubt, it's not override Shabbat, the bris. If not the same school of thought. Amar Rav Yosef mena minala. Rav Yosef said, why you're allowed to go ahead and do that? So he explained, and he said, בתניא רבי אליעזר הכפר אומר, לא נחלקו בית שמאי ובית הלל הנולד כשהוא מעון שצריך להפיר ממנו דם ברית. both Beit Shammai doesn't have any machloket, any disputation if he was born circumcised that you have to take out the blood. Al manech leku. What is the real machloket? Lechalel al Shabbat. If the 8 days occurred in Shabbat, you're allowed to go ahead and pull out the blood of the covenant. Beit Shammai we mechalim את Shabbat, we אומרים אין mechalim את Shabbat. Beit Shammai said yes, Beit Shammai said no. You cannot violate Shabbat for that. לאו מכלל לתנא קמא סבר מחללים עליו את השבת. So what do you understand? So that it means that the first Tana hold that Rabbi Elazar Kapara disagree with, that according to everyone you should go ahead and violate Shabbat in order to pull out the blood of the covenant, because he said that it's a concealed foreskin, and that's exactly what I hold. So the GEMARA asked and said, "V'dilma Tana kama divrei kol mechalelim alav." And perhaps the first Tana is saying that everyone agrees that one may not desecrate Shabbat in that case, and Rabbi Elazar Kapar disagree and hold that is a dispute with disregard. So they said, "Im ken Rabbi Elazar Kapar the Beit Shammai atala l'shmuinan." So Rabbi Elazar Kapar come to teach us according to the halacha of Beit Shammai. So what's the difference between him and one Beit Shammai said? Dilma hachikamar. Maybe that's the way. Perhaps that's the way what he is saying. Lo nechelku Beit Shammai Beit Hillel bedavar zeh. Beit Shammai Beit Hillel did not disagree with regard to this mirror, which is a circumcision of a baby born circumcised on Shabbat. They disagree with regard to the requirement to drip a covenant blood on a weekday. Amar Rav Asi. Kol. Now we talk about the time of the brit, which is the 8th day. So Rav Asi said, "Kol sheimot me'al leida nimo leshmona, v'chol she'en imot me'al leida en nimo leshmona." Okay. So now we need to understand the foundation here, because it's several stages. First, let's put together what we learned so far. According to Beit Hillel, in regards to putting a blood of the covenant, so we said if someone was born circumcised, there are 3 different school of thoughts. First one is Tana Kama. He hold that according to Beit Hillel, you do not need to pull out the blood of the covenant. Second, it's the opinion of Rabbi Elazar Kapar and Rabbah, hold that it's also the Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, that you have to draw blood because it's a fake, it's not clear, maybe it's concealed foreskin. So therefore, if it's during the week, you shall pull out a blood of the covenant, but if it's Shabbat, you do not. Then the third one, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, and according to Rav Yosef and Rav Ada bar Abba, that you have to pull out the blood because it's for sure for concealed foreskin, and then you have to do it even on Shabbat. So basically you see in a final halacha that Rav and Shmuel dispute over that, because according to the Rav, halacha is follow the Tana Kama, that you do not have to draw blood, and according to the Shmuel, halacha according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar, that you do have to pull out the blood. And the Rishonim also have a disputation over that, and the Shulchan Aruch hold in Yoredea, Reish Samech Gimel and Reish Samech Vav, that if it's during the week, you have to pour out the blood, but not in Shabbat, and that's the way the Rambam hold. So later we go to a final halacha. Now, here in our sugya, if it's a regular baby that was born, so the Torah tells us that there is a certain period of time the mother needs to go to a period of time of impurity after the delivery of the baby. So he said, Kol she'imot me'ah, the principle, any child whose birth renders his mother ritually impure due to a childbirth, so he said, Nimol lishmona, is circumcised at the 8 days, V'chol she'en imot me'ah, in any child whose birth does not render his mother ritually impure, for example, if it was yotzei dofen, if it was a procedure, the birth was not natural. So they said it was a surgery some type. Or another option, if the mother wasn't Jewish at the time of the pregnancy, and then she converted to Judaism. So they said in this situation, and nimor lishmona, so it's not necessarily circumcised at the 8 days, which means you don't have to wait, you can circumcise the baby right away. How do you know? Because the Torah said in Vayikra, in Leviticus chapter 12, Isha ki tazriya v'yalda zachar v'tamar v'yom hashmini imor b'sar orlato. If a woman bears seed and give birth to a male, she shall be impure 7 days. And then later in several sentences, the next sentence they said, on the 8 days of the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. So because it's attached, the one subject to the other, we learn that the 8 days is the circumcision apply only if his mother can be in a state of impurity, which means, again, father that his mother is not have any type of ritual impurity, he has to be circumcised by Yom HaRishon, the first day. Rashi said, clearly, kegon yotzei dofen. Kegon yotzei dofen, you see 4 lines from the bottom in Rashi, kegon yotzei dofen, if it's a procedure, v'nochrit she'yalda u'lemachar nitgaira, if a non-Jewish mother deliver and then she convert, en bna mamtin al shmona el animol miyad, the baby is not waiting for the 8 days, rather you may you circumcise the baby right away. If you remember, the GEMARA in Ketubot tells us that if it's a convert, a baby, you can convert even ger katan, even a baby, little baby, or baby adopted or regular baby, and therefore you can do the circumcision. You don't need to wait for the period of the 8 days. So Abaye asked a question. Omar le Abaye, Dorot Arishonim. Abaye said, and that's what, let's see, Rashi said, Me'avraham ad matan Torah, shenetna mila velo na'agu tuma. Rashi tells us, from Avraham Avinu, from the Abraham, our ancestors, until the time of the giving the Torah, the whole idea of Brit Milah was a voluntary act. It wasn't a commandment that we received. The Torah said in Bereshit, in Genesis 17, the whole process of the 8 days, Hashem talked to Abraham, etc., etc. But Yuchichu, that will prove why she'en imot me'al leida. The whole idea of Tumat Leida, the Torah said in the book of Leviticus, was after the giving the Torah, Venimor Lishmona. But you see that they circumcised at the 8th day. So meaning, including someone that the mother doesn't have the state of ritual impurity, yet he's still circumcised at the 8 days. So Rav Asi responded and he said, Amar le nitna Torah. And we just turned the page, 135b. V'nitchadsha halacha, the Torah was given, and the halacha was introduced, which means that you cannot bring any proof that it can be cited from the observance of the mitzvot prior to the revelation of Sinai. So here, the Rambam said in the Pirush HaMishnayot in Chulin 7, he said that, and I quote the Rambam, and he said as follows, וכן אנו מלים בגלל שאברהם מלא את עצמו ואת השם ביתו. So we are not circumcised because Abraham circumcised his household. That's not the reason the Rambam said that we made a brit. אלא מפני שהשם ציוונו על ידי משה לאמול כמו שעשה אברהם. Only because Hashem, the Almighty, commanded us to do by the letter that delivered in the revelation of Sinai by Moshe Rabbeinu, that should follow the footstep of Abraham. But the key point is that's the Vayikra, the source that Moshe Rabbeinu delivered to us. So the Gemara asks, Eini, what you saying? That the real halacha is that if his mother is not ritual impure, so he is not circumcised at the 8 days, wait. Ve'itmar, we learn, yotze dofen, if someone doesn't go to the mother doesn't go to a regular delivery, or umi sheyesh lo shte orlot, if a baby was born in a double foreskin, so which means one at the top of the other. So the Rashi here brings two explanations, which is very important. Rashi said here, either shnei orot ze al ze, which means two foreskin, one at the top of the other, or another option is ve'amre le shnei gidin, again the two on the top of the other, on the side of the other, one next to the other. So Rav Huna ve'Rav Chia Bara is a machloket. Chad amar, one said mechalelim alav et Shabbat. One said if it's a situation like that, you go ahead and you can, the mitzvah of milah override Shabbat, which means either one of these cases, either yotze dofen or double foreskin, you can go ahead and make the brit on the 8 days if it's occurred on Shabbat. V'chad amar ein mechalelim alav ta Shabbat. The second one said that no. Why? So the Meiri explained, since we do not know which foreskin is the essence, so you enter the domain of dilemma. You are in a quandary, you are in a safek, you don't know clearly, so you're not allowed to violate Shabbat. The whole key point is you do it only when it's very clear. But if it's ambiguous situation, if it's not clear, then it's a question, because what happened here? If you have a double foreskin, you have to cut both of them. So therefore, if it was clearly one of them needed, not the other, and you are in debate, that's not sufficient to go ahead and violate Shabbat. So that's the machloket. So ad kan lo pligei, this machloket of Amoraim is applied only ela lechalel alav et Shabbat. It's only to go ahead and violate the Shabbat by doing the Brit Milah. Aval shmona, vadai ma'alin aleh. But if you go in a regular procedure of counting 8 days, so you have to go ahead and circumcise at the 8th day. Shulchan Aruch Harav or Achaim, it's very important. Shulchan Aruch Harav Balatanya or Achaim Shin Lamed Aleph. We do not have time, but for anybody who view us or anybody who wish to go a little deeper with this halachot, please read the Shulchan Aruch Harav or Achaim Shin Lamed Aleph. He elaborates on that a lot. Anyway, so they said here, excuse me, they said, so when it's come to 8 days, for sure we have to do the Brit Milah, because the mitzvah of the 8 days apply here. Now, it is important to know, I'm just give you a vignette of that. The Chazon Ish said that when you have this safek, this question, he said that you have to go ahead and do this type of procedure. Now, he holds that Avraham Avinu, Abraham, doesn't have the pri'ah. That's basically Chaim Alevi that deal with that, which is, they said here, the Gemara said, Habe had Talia, one depend on the other. So Rambam hold that if it's Yotze Dofen, if it's not a regular procedure, or if you have double foreskins, so the Rambam hold that the Brit has to be at the 8 days, but we do not desecrate the Shabbat for that situation. So the only thing the Rambam said, you have to do it at the 8 days. The Chidushei Reb Chaim Alevi said that the Rambam hold only mitorat vadai, only when it's clear. But when it's a doubt, it's a different story. He gave example. The Torah tells us in Bnei Keturah, the sons of Keturah in the book of Bereshit, that they have to have circumcision, even they are basically the sons of Keturah, which is not the Jewish race, if you go before Matan Torah in the time of Abraham. So you see here that Hashem commanded Abraham that his household should be circumcised, and the sons of Keturah circumcised. Yet, if it's come to the 8 days, so they don't have a commandment of Shabbat, so therefore it's not override Shabbat. So here, when Abaye said earlier about Dorot Rishonim, about the early generation of Abraham, the Reb Chaim Halevi said that's apply if it's a smuchin leida, which means that when we talk about the 8 days and all of that, the mitzvah mila Avraham, that Abraham had this mitzvah of circumcision, he said that it was we have to understand that we have in the Torah 2 entities. One is the mitzvah of mila that Hashem said the Avraham in his household. One, the mitzvah of mila that applied to us, which is when Hashem gave to Moshe Rabbeinu in Sinai, and he said the Yimol Besaula, to the 8 days he should have the circumcision. That's applied to if his mother can be ritually impure, and that's only after the giving the Torah, and that overrides Shabbat. So in other words, Reb Chaim Halevi here brought absolute 2 entities, that one, in the sense, it's not much to do with the others, which is what we abide by, according to Reb Chaim Halevi, and that's the way the Chazon Ish challenged it. It's the solely and only the second source of Vayikra. Anyway, Ketanai. That's go by the Machloket Tanaim. That said as follows: Yelid Bait Shenimo Le'echad. So Rashi said it means that he was circumcised right away. V'yesh Yelid Bait Shenimo Le'shmona. So Rashi said here, Ktivi Beilid Bait Umiknat Kesef. There are 2 different entities. One, Yelid Bait, which means that someone was born in from the maid. Let's say Mr. Reuven has a maid, and the maid bore a child. So that's called Yelid Bait, from his maid. Umiknat Kesef, which means the owner purchased him. So purchase him, so that's a different story. Because the idea of circumcision, Rashi said, Velo mefaresh lelechet yamim. Because miknat kesef umistabra dai mefaresh balishmona, which means that it's not clear if the owner purchased that maid, then it's a different entities. So yesh miknas kesef shel nimo leechad, yesh miknas kesef shel nimo leshmona. There are circumstances that it's a first day, the circumstance the 8th day if he purchased that maid. How? We go to the details. It says yesh miknat, by the reason that the Torah said it in the 2 different entities. Yesh miknat kesef shenimo leechad, yesh miknat kesef shenimo leshmona. Keitzad? How? Lakach shivcha meuberet. If the owner purchased in those days, that's the way they did it. So they took a Canaanite maid that she was pregnant. Ve'achar kach yalda, and then she delivered a baby boy. Zeu miknat kesef animo lishmona. Since it now belongs to the owner in a biblical precept, so therefore you need to go ahead and circumcise the baby at the 8 days. Lakach shivcha uvladaima, which means he bought her with the baby. Zoi miknat kesef shenimo leechad. Now he wants to put the baby under the covenant. You have to do it right away the first day. Which means, if you have, which happened, an Arab come to us, and he wants to be part of our covenants, so you don't wait 8 days. If he's not circumcised, you have to circumcise him right away. Arab is not the best example. Let's say so many Russian came to Israel. If a Russian came and wants to be Jewish, that's the way it is. You don't wait 8 days. So they said, V'yesh yelid bait shenimo lishmona keitzad, and you have someone that by their housemaid that you need to wait to 8 days. When keitzad lakach shivcha v'nitabra etzlo, he bought a maid and she became pregnant, v'yalda, and then she delivered a baby. Zeu yelid bait animo lishmona. Then you have to wait for the 8 days. Rav Chama Omer, Rav Chava disagreed and said yalda ve'achar kach hitbila. So then part of the procedure, you need to have her duck in a mikveh for the purpose of being his servant. So zeu yelid bait shenimo leechad. So again, Shulchan Aruch Yoradeh Reish Samech Zayin, we'll read it later, all the halachot, but I just go first the Gemara. Hitbila v'achar kach yalda zeu yelid bait animo lishmona. If she is then first duck and then she delivered the babies, then the 8 days. V'Tana Kama disagree with Rav Chama, ve'lo shan ela ben hitbila v'achar kach yalda ben yalda v'achar kach hitbila, דאבל גב דנימות מעלה, דנימו לשמונה. You need to wait for the 8 days regardless. אמר רב אביש, אמר לרב חמא משכח לילית בית, נימו לך לילית בית, נימו לשמונה. If you go by lead by that someone who's born to the maid in the house, we understand that why it's 8 days. מקנת כסף, if it's a purchase, נימו לאחד ומקנת כסף ונימו לשמונה. How come? ילדה, ואחר כך התבילה. זה lead בית שנימו לאחד. If the tvila happened after she delivered, so then the first day. התבילה ואחר כך ילדה, if she ducked and then she delivered the baby, זה lead בית שנימו לשמונה. I need to wait for 8 days because his mother have under the category of ritual impurity. מקנת כסף נימו לשמונה כהון שלקח שנבחר מעוברת איתו כמי that is already pregnant והתבילה ואחר כך ילדה. And then she ducked in the mikveh and then she delivered the baby. מקנת כסף נימו לאחד כהון שלקח זה שפחה וזהו ברא. He took the maid with the baby. תנא קמא בישלמה כולו משכחת לה. All of that, which means מקנת כסף that go for the 8 days. And Yelid Bai that goes for the 8 days. And Yelid Bai nimol echad mashkach. How come someone is in a house that go the first day? Which means he took the maid before she became pregnant, and then after that she conceived. And now we go to the whole idea of kinyanim. He said that if you tell me acquiring, this is GEMARA in Bava Batra, Kuf Lamed Vav 136, that deal in other places, that if you're buying, for example, fruits, so is that considering buying it and it's a final stage, which means someone purchase a property for the purpose of having the fruits that coming out of the properties. So it's going by a certain period of times. And then it go after the lease to the original owner. So it's a question how you hold it. So he said, the one said that there's no difference, it's like part of perot and the goof is the same thing. He took her in a condition that not to duck her for the purpose of being his servant. So therefore, that's different. You have to go by the first day. תניא רבי שמעון לגמליאל אומר כל שעה 30 יום באדם אינו נפל הוא בדויה של מה הוא בדויה מנוחה של זה. Now we're going to להלכות which tomorrow Mitzvah Shem will continue. If up to the 30 days is considering a nefel, which means it's not under the category of regular human in the halachic category, only if the baby passed the 30 days. So if a baby was the baby born was 30 days, so it's not, he is not nefel anymore because it's bar kayama, it's past the 30 days, because we said the time that to go for pidyon ben is go be ben chodesh tiva. The Torah said in Bamidbar in Book of Numbers chapter 18, you have to go and do the whole procedure of redeem the baby by the Kohen, all these prices of pidyon ben from the 30 days. Shmonat yamim bebehema. But if it's an animal, if it's the baby was there for 8 days, אינו נפל, שנאמר מיום הנשנבה להירצה לקורבן. When he's talking about offering, so they said from the 8 days and onward, it's good for offering. Vayikra, Leviticus 22. So because the Torah depends the time of the offering for the 8 days, we retroactively understand that that's the time, Rashi said, and not the other way. The Ran disagree. So that's the concept now of Ravel El Mafreya, which means you understand retroactively. Ha lo shahas fake havi. So the idea is the Gemara asks if it's not the period of time of 30 days, so it's a question if he survive or not. So it's a safek nefel. The same apply to animals. If it's a safek nefel, if it's in a period of time that it's not clear, so mimhal heichamalin alei. How you will be able to do the breed. Now, in that sense, we have to stop here because it's a new sugya, and we continue tomorrow with that sugya. Let's go to practical halacha. Many halachot, Baruch Hashem, we study today. Hermaphrodite circumcision, milat androgynous, Rambam, Hilchot Milat, chapter 1, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 331, Yoredea 266. The circumcision of hermaphrodite does not override Shabbat. That's the opinion of the rabbis. Again, Shabbat, it's so holy for us, it's so important that any little doubt, forget it, you cannot do it on Shabbat. Nolad ben hashmashot, if was born in the twilight. When a child is born at twilight, the 8 days of his circumcision begin the night following twilight. However, the later day does not override Shabbat or festival, or even the second day of festival in the exile. That's the Rosh and the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, the same sources. Nolad kshu ma'ul, if the baby was born circumcised, even though he is circumcised at the age of 8 days, his circumcision does not override Shabbat, which means the whole idea of tzarich la'ativ dam brit, that it's necessary to drip a covenant blood. The primary discussion of halachot of circumcision appears in the Tractate Yevamot, including a discussion concerning the halachot of the Brit Milah, of circumcision of a convert. The early and late commentaries debated whether the essence of the mitzvah of Brit Milah is for a person to remain without a foreskin, or whether the essence of the mitzvah is to perform the act of circumcision itself. Apparently, dripping blood from a child without a foreskin is a form of circumcision and fulfills the mitzvah. Nevertheless, the authority dispute whether or not a blessing is recited over this act. With regard to a convert, however, the consensus appears to be the central act of conversion is the immersion in a ritual bath in a mikveh, but you have to remember that it said leshem, for the sake of conversion. Ben Shmona, the sages of the GEMARA cite sources that allude to the notion that a child born after the 8th month of pregnancy cannot survive. Nevertheless, they provided clear physical signs that indicate whether or not the child was fully developed. So now you see the issue is when a baby is born circumcised, his circumcision involves dropping covenant blood from him, so this must be performed very carefully to avoid endangering him based on the incident involving of Rabbi Abba. You remember that they said, and the statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar and Rabbi Eliezer HaKapar. Remember that mistake that was made. When a circumcised non-Jew convert to Judaism, a drop of covenant blood is drawn from him, then he immerses in the mikveh. That's the Geonim and Balachot Gdolot, the Rif, the Rambam. Rabbeinu Hananel dispute this ruling, but there are many opinions with regard to the rationale for this ruling. Some commentaries explain that based on this ruling and later authorities, the halacha is according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, that one must drip a covenant blood from the circumcised convert. Others' authority explain that it's based on the ruling in Tractate Yevamot that a drop of covenant blood is drawn from a circumcised convert. One may desecrate Shabbat to save a life of a baby born after 7 months of pregnancy. If the 8th day after his birth occurred on Shabbat, he is circumcised on Shabbat. However, it is assumed that the baby born after 8 months cannot survive. Therefore, one may not move the baby on Shabbat, one may not desecrate the Shabbat to save his life, and if the 8th day after his birth occurs on Shabbat, he is not circumcised on Shabbat. This rule refers to a baby whose hair and nails are not fully developed. If the baby is fully developed, then Shabbat is desecrated on his behalf and is for any other child. That's the Rambam Hilchot Milah chapter 1, and the Rema also have a comment on Shulchan Aruch Yoadea 266. Now, what happened if the child, both the child that born by Nituach Kesari, cesarean section, or one who has a 2-4 skin, both situations they circumcised on the 8th day. However, one does not desecrate Shabbat for their circumcision. The circumcision is postponed until Sunday. So again, not in the regular manner of delivery, procedures or double foreskin, not desecrate Shabbat, but you have to do it at the 8 days. The reason for this ruling is that the Amoraim disputed in the matter and not definite conclusion was reached. Therefore, the ruling is stringent in a sense that we don't desecrate the Shabbat, but we go by the 8 days. We learn also Yelid Bait Miknat Kesef. We said that if is a situation of one purchase in the ancient time a pregnant maid servant, and she accepted upon herself the obligation of a maid servant belonging to a fellow Jew, when she gives birth, her child is circumcised at the 8 days. However, if one purchased the maid servant on the condition that he will not immerse her as a maid servant, or if one only purchased a fetus, the child is considering have been purchased for money transactions, and therefore the child is circumcised on the first possibly day after the transaction is completed, even if the day is of his birth. That's the Braita said. Now we talk also about Nefel, and that's the last halacha of today. When it is unclear if a child was born after a full-term pregnancy, the child loses the possible status of a stillborn, and after he lives for 30 days. If the infant then dies, the child is mourned by his family members. By the child's father is a Kohen, he is permitted to attend the funeral. That's the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So again, it's a very serious question. You need to ask a prominent posek in that matter. But as far as the animal, the newborn animal that has not yet lived for 8 days is still considered potentially not viable, and therefore if it is possible to partake of its flesh due to the concern of the prohibition to eat unslaughtered animal. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and I said it many times. In those serious halachot, a person must ask a prominent posek to know, because each circumstance is different. And here we're talking about serious halachic questions, so always ask a prominent posek before making a decision.
Kare tu